welcome to episode 3 of Divine Superconductor Radio. I'm your host, Matt Blackburn, and today we are speaking with Jeanie Rubin of East West Healing. Josh is a thyroid expert, metabolism expert, and just an expert in coaching people on how to bring balance back to their life. I really like his simple approach. It's very practical. It's based on physiology and not just studies, and really how the body works. This interview is jam-packed with information. We cover stress, breath work, exercise, hydrochloric acid, digestion, hormones, and then we actually jump into a pretty lengthy Q&A session from questions that I received from you guys. So sit back, grab your pro-metabolic food, and enjoy it. All right, welcome to Divine Superconductor Radio. This is Matt Blackburn, and I'm here with Mr. Jeanie Rubin. How you doing, Josh?
Good. How you doing?
Awesome. So Josh runs East West Healing with his wife, Jeanie, and they discuss thyroid health, metabolic health, stress management, just holistic health in general, but how to approach it using food and breath work mainly. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, our goal is we say we help people restore thyroid health with food. That's kind of our tagline. And really what we're doing is, obviously that's the simplistic way of explaining it, and people can grasp that. Some can, some can't. But really what we're doing is we're helping people use food in a way that helps their cells breathe properly, because we come into this world as a cell, we multiply, and we are walking conglomeration of cells. So our cells are like the conductor of an orchestra. They conduct the systems. The cells are working, the system's working. The cells aren't working how they should, there's going to be a problem with the system. So that's kind of our focus. But of course, if we said, hey, yeah, we work to help people restore, cell health and mitochondrial energy production, most people are like, what?
Yeah. So how did you get into this line of work? Was it working with clients and seeing what didn't work and then kind of just being guided to what works?
I was in an accident, and when I was in a coma, God spoke to me. I'm just kidding. It's been a journey. I think what you said actually is interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think through the process of being introduced into the industry, me and my wife have very different backgrounds, but, we kind of came together and say, wow, like what we're doing is working, but it's what everyone else is doing. And it's no different than allopathic medicine, right? We're treating labs, we're treating people with supplements, we're chasing symptoms, and we're not really looking at the person. And for us, it was like a light bulb moment. And of course, at that time, there was a lot of influences. Of course, Ray Peat being one of them, Hans Healy, all these different people, even Paul Chek. And it was like, everyone's forgetting about the person. So we want to do true, quote unquote, holistic healing, whatever you want to call it, and really look at the person and find out where they came from, what their life is like, what their sleep is like. So along that process, of course, stepping into Ray's work, we got to the point of like, wow, we're cells and we need to regulate thyroid health in order to regulate the systems. And that's kind of how we fell into it. And of course, over the past, 12 plus years, it's just been an evolution of doing it. And I feel, and I think my wife would agree, the evolution has been not just reading books, because we love to read and study and listen to podcasts like everyone else, but it's been the application of it, not only in our life, but working with clients for 18 years all around the world. That's been the biggest teacher, because you have science and you have philosophy. When you apply it to a real person, it doesn't always work out. And you have to find what works and what doesn't work. So that's really been the biggest teacher to really evolve what we call our RTN philosophy.
I love that. So stress plays a big role, right? Because I was introduced to Hans Selye late last year, and just the research that I'm doing on stress is just unbelievable. It seems like that is the killer, right? More than heavy metals, more than parasites and all these issues that people talk about.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people take that word for what it's worth, just like everything else. It's like, oh, you have Hashimotos. It's a thyroid problem. Let me look at the thyroid. Unfortunately, we don't look at it that way. So when you talk about stress, the way we look at it is it's not a thing, right? Because if you study Hans Selye's work, he says that it's not stress, but the perception of stress that kills us, right? It's kind of like we could go watch a movie and I'm like, wow, that was like the best movie I've ever seen. And you're like, wow, that was the worst movie I've ever seen, right? Everything is perception. I hate moving. It is a huge stress to me. It just gives me anxiety saying that word. But my wife is like, I don't really care, And I think a lot of it has to do, of course, with our upbringing, traumas, stresses, who we are internally, our nervous systems, etc. So I think what we need to realize, it's not a thing, it's what's happening physiologically in our system. So stress is really, are the demands being placed on our body exceed what the body can handle, right? And I don't think stress is bad, because the right type of stress allows us to build resiliency, right? A good example is exercise, right? We do an exercise program. We start at base level 1, we do it, and then we progress. We go to base level 2, we go to base level 3. But if we started at base level 3, that would be an extreme stress. That would be like you're hopping on a roller coaster all day, every day, during that entire cycle. Versus starting at cycle 1 or base conditioning 1, it's almost like you're hopping on the roller coaster and getting off. You're adapting to that stress, which increases your resiliency, and it takes you or keeps you in that adaptation state versus compensatory state. But yes, we believe that your inability to meet the demands that are being placed in your body creates that stress reaction from the brain down to the organs. And it is a huge catalyst, right? We are everything from conception till now. And that's a buildup. That's an accumulation, and that's what's really creating disease, symptoms, disorders, etc.
Awesome. Didn't Selye say stress is the perceived need for sugar? Is that? Or someone said that. Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, I think it was Donald Trump. It could have been Ray Pete. I don't know, but yeah, it's or Ray Pete quoting someone. So, they say stress is the perceived need for sugar. And for a while, when I used to say that, it took me a while to truly understand what that meant. But what it means is when something is happening physiologically, a stress, hypothalamus, pituitary, down to the adrenals or thyroid or gut, we need energy to regulate it, right? Anytime there's more stress, we need energy to regulate our blood sugar, regulate our blood pressure, regulate our heart rate, regulate inflammation, whatever it may be. We need more energy. And that energy comes from sugar. If we don't have that sugar, that's when we go to that compromised state or that compensatory mode, if it's long term.
Awesome. Yeah, because stress, it suffocates the cells, right? And so your body is just trying to siphon energy to bring back cellular function.
Yeah, I mean, I think the excessive amount of stress can do that, because if you're able to have stress in your life, it's like the work of Hans Selye. It's that alarm reaction. That's not a bad place to be, right? But if you're in that and you don't come out of that, you're going to go through his phases, resistance, exhaustion, etc. But we want to be able to go into the alarm state and come back to our more balanced state. And that's where things like food frequency, breath work, me time, doing the things that you like to do allow you to create that balance, and that creates resiliency. But if we're chronically stressed, the example I gave, whether it's running from a lion or running a sprint or hopping in a roller coaster, that's not a stress. We go into a stress state, but we get off, our heart rate's going, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, we're back down to homeostasis, right? Our pulse regulates everything. But if we stay on that roller coaster or we keep running those sprints or running from a lion day after day after day, that acute stress now becomes chronic. And that's where we start seeing not only degeneration, gut issues, thyroid issues, hormone issues, etc. We start seeing cellular changes. And the biggest one is our cells become hypoxic because they're not getting oxygen, they're not getting glucose, and they're not getting thyroid hormones. So we're not producing energy. And this means no matter how healthy you're eating, if you're not converting that energy, then your body is not in a healing state. It's actually in an inflammatory state.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I have a lot of friends that are really into electromagnetic fields and, 5G and Wi-Fi, but stressing about it is worse than the actual radiation damage, right? So
we've always said that because I think, our society is if you really think about it, like life in our world is beautiful, but it's psychologically messed up, right? People, like a good example is the other day I posted, obviously, if you follow our Instagram page, you know that I am, not my wife. She is supportive of me, but I'm a huge Patriots fan. I was born and raised in Boston. It's who I am. So I posted a picture of Julian Edelman, who got MVP, and he was holding his hands up, was in the game, play, like this. And someone messaged me and said, you're promoting the devil's horns, and this is a bad message and all this stuff. And I'm like, the stress of thinking about just a picture from a player in the game and telling me that the media is doing that to convince, I can't even comprehend what they were saying, but that's where people are right now. And unfortunately, that journey of health, we've been doing this 18 years. Back in the day, it was like, can you talk to me about organic food? Can you just tell me what foods are healthy? And then it evolved to I need to do some functional medicine labs and take some supplements. That was the thing. And then it was I have a parasite, kill my parasite. And then it was Candida. Then it was H. pylori. And now it's just a complete extreme. It's everything. People are so paralyzed, they don't know what to do. So their journey of health is becoming so healthy, and they're stressing about the littlest things. Instead of saying, well, who am I? I'm human. Okay, I need sunshine and air and to breathe and food and balance. And all those other things don't live on this planet if you don't want to be stressed by them, or go live on an island if you don't want to be stressed by them. They're there. You have to build the resiliency. It's about how can I change my environment externally and my perception environment to create health internally. But unfortunately, if we don't do that and we're like, oh my God, 5G, get this phone away from me, I'm never going to sleep. And it's the times. It is the times. It's just about creating balance within your environment that's going to be able to regulate what's happening.
That's well said. Yeah, I follow, PC culture, and I think free speech is under attack right now, and people are just way too hypersensitive. And when you're hypersensitive and you're offended by everything, that's another stress we don't need. We don't need to be offended by every little thing that we see or hear.
Well, that's a good point, because if you study the work of Hans Healey, study the work of Gabor Mate, we're actually watching a documentary the other day. I think it's called Healing. It was actually pretty good. They talk about fear being one of the largest drivers of stress emotionally in the system. And emotional stress trumps physical stress, right? It doesn't matter if you live in fear or you eat a Pop-Tart. The way the body reacts physiologically is exactly the same. It doesn't go, oh, this is a fear-based stress, and this is a genetically modified, grain stress. It doesn't do that. It's all the same. So if you're walking around fearful of a picture of Julian Edelman, you're fearful of the devil, you're fearful of 5G, you're fearful of the chemicals you're using on your couch, guess what's happening physiologically to your system day in and day out? You're on that roller coaster. So you can eat the best food in the world. You can work with the best practitioners in the world. You can taste the most expensive supplement from Thailand. It's not going to do anything.
What about celery juice, though?
Well, that's the only thing that'll eliminate all that.
Yeah, it's funny how we go through these trends of this is the cure-all, right? But I like your approach and your and Jeannie's because it's more holistic. It's taking into account everything instead of looking for one plant, one herb to cure, everything. So I know you're fascinated with the vagus nerve and this thing called vagal tone. Can you kind of just break that down and summarize what that is? And
I mean, it's really simple. The higher your vagal tone, if you study the work of Stephen Porges, he's someone to study. His work's slightly technical, but he has a lot of great YouTubes that clarify some of his work. There's some others. I just can't think of them right now. They're challenging names to remember. But the higher your vagal tone, the more auto-regulated your system is. The lower your vagal tone, the more susceptible you are to disease. And when you really look at the body and you break it down physiologically, the nervous system is the driver of everything, right? The cells drive the nervous system drives the whole body, right? So when we create that autoregulation, we create that regulated vagal tone, or what they call vagal brake, right? So if we need to go sympathetic, the vagal brake comes off, we go sympathetic, but then when we need to come back down, the vagal brake goes on, etc. And I'm simplifying it, right? Unfortunately, over time, like I've talked about, when we're always on that roller coaster running from a lion, our vagal tone gets lower, our vagal brake weakens. So we're always in that heightened excitatory state, right? So when you use food in a strategic way, like we talk about, or you use mindset or emotional work to change the perception of your environment, or understand like the traumas that you've gone through, you can't erase them. But I think if you understand them, right, you can move through them, and go through that work and have a different outlook of what happened, or maybe in life. Same thing with breath work. It's the third way to really tap into the nervous system. We can control the parasympathetic, the sympathetic, how much CO2 we're excreting, how much CO2 we're holding. And all these come together to really regulate the autonomic nervous system, which is vagal tone, right? So anytime we produce energy at the cell level, we strengthen vagal tone. We can do that with food, and we can do that with breathing, right? Because when we nose breathe, we can get oxygen into our cells. When we change the perception of our environment, right, we can just simplify it and say, don't be so negative, look at things in a different manner, in a positive manner. We change our internal environment, right? Because we work through the fear or whatever it may be. So, you're really just working on, if you want to think about it from a sense of like bank account, you're increasing your overall energy bank account. You're increasing your overall vitality. Your body is in a much more adaptable, resilient state.
Is it accurate to say that the vagus nerve is kind of like the skeleton that connects the whole nervous system, so that it's the overstimulation of that nerve that kind of like burns it out? Or
Well, here's the thing. It can be, a lot of people think that all we need to do is do things that are parasympathetic. And unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Because if you overstimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, what happens? We go into freeze mode, right? That's like the reptilian brain. What happens when you see a lizard? They don't move, right? That's overstimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system. So what we're trying to really let people know is it's not about just doing overstimulation exercises or breath work to the parasympathetic nervous system. It's about quieting the excitement of the sympathetic and creating autoregulation between each.
That's a really interesting point. And I've had people tell me that mouth breathing is superior to nose breathing, but nose breathing pretty much activates the parasympathetic, right? The rest and digest branch of our nervous system, and mouth breathing puts us into a stress state, right?
Well, it's kind of an interesting topic, and it's not so black and white, because you can be hyperventilating through your nose, right? It's almost like if you think of your car having gears. So if I'm sitting here at rest and I'm nose breathing in and out nice and slowly and controlled, inhalation is correlated with the sympathetic system. Exhalation is correlated with the parasympathetic nervous system. So when I'm controlling that, I'm turning my car from a automatic into a manual. I'm taking control of my nervous system. Now, if I start breathing a little bit faster through my nose, I go into second gear. And if I start hyperventilating because I'm on the verge of going into my mouth, I'm in third gear. From there, you would go nose to mouth, right? And then you'd be mouth, and that's complete hyperventilation. You are in a different energy system, right? So really what it's saying is at a cell level, from first gear, second gear, somewhat, you are in an aerobic state, which means your cells are getting oxygen, okay? Doesn't matter what you're doing. A lot of people say, oh, that's an aerobic exercise. Well, what if I go for a walk and I'm nose breathing? Or what if I could actually run 400 meters at a nice even pace, nose breathing, and my heart rate doesn't get to 150, right? Then you see what I'm saying? So I could still be aerobic if I can nose breathe and not hyperventilate. Once you start going into hyperventilation in the nose or nose mouth or mouth, now we're going into alternative energy systems and we're more anaerobic at the cell level. So now our cells are not getting oxygen. We're not producing energy. And yes, we are in a more sympathetic state. That doesn't mean it's bad, right? Because let's say I'm a runner, right? And I run and I'm like, okay, or let's use a better example. I do CrossFit, right? So it's like some of my workouts are 2 minutes, some are 5, some are 10. And I go into that workout and I try to nose breathe as long as I can, and then I go to the mouth. But after the workout, I lay down, I nose breathe, and I let my body recover, right? It was a stress, but it's not a stress anymore, and it's going to increase my resiliency. But if I did the workout, mouth breathe, afterwards, laid down, and never recovered, what happens? Now it was actually more of a stress, right? So if you can go from first to fifth gear, but then take control again and bring yourself back down, it's not a bad thing, right? It helps us increase our resiliency. But if you're always, even at rest, like sitting at your desk, cooking your eggs, you're in line at Starbucks, you're watching TV, and you're like, what does that tell you about the state of your physiology at rest? It tells you that you just did an intense CrossFit workout at rest, or you just ran a 400 meter at rest, right? You're in an anaerobic state all the time. And that's why nose breathing is such a powerful tool. I don't think you need crazy devices. It's just our take on it, because you have a crazy device. It's called a nose. Unfortunately, people they can't use it because it's stuffed, whatever it may be. And that's because they've been nose breathing, right? So it doesn't have to be crazy. We just initially tell people, start becoming aware of when you're mouth breathing, and I want you to start nose breathing as much as possible. That's the first thing. There's other things that you can do, but that is the most important thing that you can do, because it will warm, humidify, and filter the air. It'll get oxygen, into the system, to your tissues, your brain, your cells, etc. And will obviously unclog your nose. So that's really the first step.
Can I real quick interject, Josh? You said you can get a stuffed nose from too much nose breathing. Did I understand that correct? Or?
Mouth breathing.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So it's the balance between working with the different gears, working and controlling the systems that strengthens vagal tone or prevents I forgot the word you used, but just constantly, like constant stimulation on the vagus nerve. I just think it's the balance, because if we're walking around and we're trying to do everything in a nose breathing sense, right? What happens the next time you need to mouth breathe? Now it's going to become a huge stress because we can't. So it's fine, right? It's not going too far left. It's not going too far right. It's finding that balance, right? It's like saying, well, I'm afraid of the sun. I'm going to stay in my house all the time. Well, what happens when you go out of your house after a year? You're going to be screwed in many ways.
Instant sunburn. Yeah. I grew up in a neighborhood where I would see older people first thing, they drink their coffee, eat breakfast, and then go for a run, like every day on the sidewalk. Do you think that could be unhealthy if people are chronically stressed and not regulating their stress and pounding their joints on the sidewalk all the time?
I was on another podcast yesterday, and he was asking me about exercise, comparing it to fasting, and both are stress, and how come I advocate exercise and not fasting. And and I think when it comes to exercise, it's about finding the type that works for your body and allows you to heal and allows you to increase your resiliency, right? And a lot of people, this brings it to a good point, because a lot of people will message us and say, is this good if I eat this? Is this good if I do this? I don't know. It really comes down to, is it working for your body? So if someone said, I wake up, I eat breakfast, and then I go outside and I go for a jog, and I come home, I feel invigorated. My pulse and temp are normal after 30 minutes. I eat within 30 minutes. I sleep great. I feel great. We know it's working. It's not a bad thing. But if someone says, I didn't eat, or whatever it may be, I came in, that workout just kicked my ass. I had to sit down for 20 minutes. My knees were hurting me. I was mouth breathing 20 minutes after. My temperature was 98, but my pulse was 105 45 minutes later. My sleep's being affected. Then it didn't work for you. You're in phase 3 exercise. You need to come back to phase 1. Maybe you need to go for a walk instead of run. Maybe you need to walk and nose breathe instead of run right now. That's your baseline. And we need to build you up over time. So I think it really comes down to not so much is A, B, C, D bad, but who's the person and is it really working for them or not based on feedback?
Yeah, context is so key. And I think a lot of people forget about that. So their traumas, what stressors they just had or they're dealing with that affects which, foods would be good for them and all that. I mean, for some people, if they have, it's rare, but hyperthyroid, if it's
Right.
overactive, then PUFAs and legumes and grains might be good, right?
Right. So I think it's like the question that we get a lot is like, I'm going to have a smoothie for breakfast. This is what's in it. Is that okay? Try it. I don't know. I can tell you based on experience with my clients, it's not going to work or last you more than an hour or 90 minutes. It's not going to let you go for 4 hours. But it comes down to feedback. And that's really what we're trying to teach people is awareness. It's not about just doing something because it says so in a blog or a book or because we know that fruit is healthy. It comes down to the person and is it working for them? That's the most important thing. Because when we do that, what are we doing? We're creating awareness and we're listening to the body and we're giving our body what it needs on a day-to-day basis. And that's the most important thing.
Awesome. And there are some across the board things that you speak about, like fruits and roots, right? We know those to be pro-thyroid for everybody. And we know that grains, soy, nut seeds tend to suppress thyroid function.
Well, from our standpoint, when we talk about metabolic foods, we're talking about foods that are supportive to the cells, supportive to the thyroid, and really foods that the body can utilize. It's like you put diesel fuel in a diesel engine. You're not going to say, well, it's bad for the environment, so I want to put water in there. It doesn't work like that, right? Same thing with cows. Cows have 4 stomachs. They're ruminants. They are designed to break down cellulose. That's why they can only eat grass. You give them anything else, they will eat it, right? They will eat a dead chicken. They will eat corn. They will eat soy. What happens? They get sick. That's why most cows are killed by 6 months, right? Otherwise, we couldn't eat the meat. What happens when humans eat food that they can't digest? We can still eat it. We get sick. It's the same concept because we can't break it down. So when we talk about fruits and roots, we're talking about foods that our body can utilize, digest, and assimilate for metabolic health. The liver can store, the thyroid can use, etc. Our cells can benefit from. Now with fruits, obviously, we always recommend fruits are ripe or cooked and never unripe. And then roots, or squashes or starches, we call them, always recommend that they're overcooked so they're pre-digested and easier to break down and less of a burning because most people are compromised, right? The digestive system is not working 100%. So we need to benefit in any way we can. But you're going to get not only a lot of minerals. I know a lot of people focus on like leafy greens, so many minerals. Those fruits and roots have way more minerals, and they're actually beneficial and easier to digest than leaves and leafy greens and stuff like that. So the sugars are also beneficial. The disaccharides, the fructose and the glucose. When we use those together, it's key because the glucose in these foods, mainly the starches, will stimulate insulin, but the fructose will down-regulate that spike. So we get a really good balance versus if we're eating just grains, which are all glucose, we're going to get that spike, right? So those would be your optimal carbs. We don't view grains as like thyroid suppressive. Of course, within reason. I'm not talking about like gluten-containing grains or stuff like that, but I don't care if people eat them, just within moderation. Of course, gluten-free, non-GMO. But we always recommend pairing it, of course, with a protein, but some fruit, because the fruit has more fructose. So now we're creating balance with all that glucose, and that's just our philosophy. It's about balance. It's not about being super extreme. But we also look at, is it working for you, right? Someone says, I wake up and I have a piece of toast with, half an apple. It was so good. But let's say they wake up with like a 98 temperature and a 70 pulse and they eat that breakfast 30 minutes later, just to simplify it, their temperature drops a whole degree. We have a problem, right? Maybe it didn't work, or maybe it's the ratio. So there's a lot of things we look at. It's not just like they're metabolic, I can eat them, they're going to work. It's the foundation, but you have to make sure through the process that what you're doing is really supporting your system.
Yeah, I think you see, like I do, all these memes and these, a lot of them are vegan, promoted, just like, milk causes mucus and it's acid forming, and, drink celery juice. And it's just like this black and white, like this is good, dairy, meat, bad. And I think we really have to shift the conversation to be more context based. Because it's not working for a lot of people, but they just keep doing it because they're attached to that philosophy. It's like a religion.
I think a lot of people in our society are afraid of healing. So I think there's a huge emotional component. When we heal, we have to take a lot more responsibility of ourselves, of our life, of everything. And I think for a lot of people, it's very nurturing to always get help. So I think there's a huge emotional component. And I think a lot of people in our society are suffering. So they're going to gravitate to the next best thing, That's why celery juice is so popular, I think people are struggling. But, if you really look at it and you zoom out, what's happening is it's all trends. And unfortunately, a lot of people can't see that, right? Whether it's the feeding tube diet, whether it's keto, whether it's and there's so many diets, I can't even think of them all. They're all trends, right? And what the biggest thing that we're trying to teach people is they're methods. We're trying to teach principles. We're looking at the human body and saying, this is how it works. This is what it needs because of how it works. And that's the big difference. And for some people, it's hard to wrap their head around, right? Because it's a huge mindset shift. And really what it comes down to is now I actually have to take responsibility and choose the foods that go into my system instead of just following what a book says. And that's easy, right? Now I actually have to step up and go buy the food, shop, plan, think about what works, tune into myself, which for a lot of people, that is scary to tune into themselves. So, when we talk about these trends, I think it's popular because of that fear of healing. But I think when people at some point finally see that they are trends and we have to get back to the body, that's when they'll truly heal. So I know there's a lot out there on vegan, I talk to a ton of vegans, and, I think back in the day, I was definitely much more black and white and I don't even know what the word is, but, nowadays I just talk to them and educate them and let them know what I teach and say, listen, if that's what you want to do, that's great. If that's what you're doing what you want to do, but we want people to eat protein for these reasons. If you love to come over, we'd love to help and work with you and create balance to a certain degree. But I think people have to be ready, and some people aren't ready for that change.
Those are really great points. Yeah, I see so many people passionate about, I want to heal the environment. I want to heal the animals. It's like, why don't you heal yourself first? Because until you do that, you're not going to be of help to anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. One of my mentors back in the day, Paul Chek, came up. I don't know if he came up with it or if it was from someone else. And he talked about the I, we, all principle. It's like a tree. So you have the soil and the roots. You have the tree itself, and then you have all the branches and leaves. So the soil is the I, which is you. The we is the tree itself, which would be like a friendship, a girlfriend, a wife, a relationship with your son or daughter, right? It's a we. And then the all is the branches and the trees, which is like a business, a group of friends, a family, right? So your I can only be as strong, your we can only be as strong as your I, and your all can only be as strong as your we and your I. So your I is the foundation for everything. It's representation, not only of yourself, but your relationships and your business. It's all an extension. So like you said, none of that can happen unless your I is balanced or strong, whatever you want to call it, in every aspect: physical, nutritional, mental, emotional, etc. So I definitely agree with you on that one.
Yeah, that's an awesome analogy. And I did the fruitarian thing. I was hardcore raw vegan for years, eating, a huge bowl of salad every day. And I brushed off the protein thing. That's the big, I think I even had a t-shirt, like, where do you get your protein? And that's the question that all vegans get asked. And I used to say there's protein in bananas, there's amino acids and everything, but it wasn't until many years later that I learned about strong, medium, and weak proteins. And there's the strength of them. And strong proteins are really found in animal products. The only quasi-vegan one would be bee products like royal jelly and bee pollen and honey. There's some good amino acids in there, but it's mostly eggs, milk, cheese, meats, right?
And I think that's the big issue when it comes to these diets, and it's obviously belief systems. I'm eating protein because I'm eating these foods. And you are eating protein, but you're not eating complete proteins. And that's what the body needs, right? There's a difference between a protein in peas or hemp, right, versus a protein that's in a meat or a shellfish or a whitefish or dairy, eggs, bone broth, etc. They're very different proteins. And going back to just like human physiology, our digestive system is pH driven. It's like a domino effect. The pH of your mouth to the pH of your stomach to the pH of your small intestine. And those pHs are opposite. So like your stomach is acidic, your small intestine or piece of it is more alkalinic, etc. And that's what drives the process. So in your stomach, we'll start there. It's just easier. We release hydrochloric acid for a few reasons. Number one, it's a huge piece of the immune system. So if you're not releasing hydrochloric acid, what does it tell us? That you're in an immune suppressed state. Number two, one of the only ways we can stimulate hydrochloric acid production is how? Through eating complete proteins. So the body doesn't produce hydrochloric acid for shits and giggles. It does it to break down proteins. So what happens if we don't eat complete proteins? We don't release hydrochloric acid, and we teach our body not to release hydrochloric acid, which puts us in an immune suppressed state, which alters the pH of the entire digestive system, slows things down, creates bloating, gas, constipation, fermentation, etc. And these are a lot of things vegans are struggling with, and I know a lot of people do it for belief reasons, whether there's animals and all that. That's great. I mean, everyone has their own beliefs, but when your beliefs, and this is just my thought process and experience, doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but I just feel like when your beliefs get in the way of your health, then what you're doing is not healthy. And you have to look at it and say like, well, if I'm eating healthy and I do have immune issues or thyroid issues, is it truly healthy and working for my system? So I don't like tell people it's not. I'll just say to them, what I want you to do is tomorrow wake up in bed, laying down, take your body temperature and pulse. Tell me what it is, right? Oh, it was 96. It was 35 Celsius. That is information. So instead of trying to convince people, I just have them do these applicable things so they can see that, wow, it's not working. And then most of the time people say, well, I'm not ovulating, or it was cold in my room. And those things have an influence, but not to the degree that you would think, especially if you're thermogenic. So, the body never lies. And that's why we use it as a feedback mechanism. So people can start to question what they're doing and come to the answers. One of the things I've learned is like, if someone comes to that conclusion on their own and they want to work with me versus me convincing them, the relationship works much better and their ability to reach their goals is going to happen, So that's what we use those feedback mechanisms.
That's awesome. Yeah. The more I learn about this stuff in human physiology, the more I laugh at what I used to do in the past. I mean, eating an entire head of lettuce with nuts and seeds and a ton of olive oil. I had low HCl. I had all this food fermenting, right? And that's a lot of vegans doing a lot of raw greens and a lot of nuts and seeds with low stomach acid. That's a recipe for a ton of infections, right?
Well, I think a lot of people, at least what I've seen, is people are sick. They're eating the standard American diet, and then they go vegan, and everything got better. The way I look at it is this. You could have changed to any diet, and you probably would have got better. It's not because you were vegan deficient. I mean, are you eating cleaner than you were? Sure. And that's probably the reason, but to really just look at the body and how it works, it's not going to sustain you for a long period of time, and it's challenging. I mean, I talk to a lot of vegans and they struggle because they know they need to change, but there's a part of them that really doesn't want to because of how they eat and their belief systems around it. And that's okay, because I'm just a rung on everyone's ladder, whether I help them verbally or work with them. That's all that matters. I'm not the end all be all. And maybe I'm that spark that 5 years later allows them to change. And that's great. Maybe I'm not, but, all I know is we talk to a lot of vegans, and it's challenging because I feel a lot of the reason they have GERD, bloating, etc., because of the foods they're eating. I should say it like this: like, it is because of the foods they're eating, but it is because they're not eating protein. Because yeah, fruits and roots and all that's healthier, but I also believe, like, if someone was vegan and they're eating what they eat and they just added complete proteins, they'd probably heal in to the degree that they need to, that serves them. So I think it's like more the foods they're not eating that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I always push vegans, like, well, not push, but recommend pastured eggs from a local farm, and the choline and all the protein in the egg and the B vitamins. The B complex deficiency is like an epidemic, right? Especially in the plant-based community.
Yeah. I mean, they usually, I was talking to a vegan yesterday and then through message today, and that seems to be the first protein most of them will gravitate towards. I don't know why, but maybe it's the easiest or more appetizing. Usually meats. I think people think meat is the only protein that you can eat, whether it's chicken or steak. And unfortunately, that's false. There's so many great light digestible proteins like fish, whitefish, shellfish, bone broth, collagen, eggs, dairy, that are much easier on the system. And I think emotionally easier to ingest than biting into a piece of muscle, and that's the big issue with a lot of people. I remember when I met my wife, believe it or not, she was vegetarian. And I remember sitting down with her in her eating meat, and it was challenging. She would be like, "Oh, I feel like I'm biting into a muscle." And I'm like, "Well, you are, So, she would do the fish and all that, but she started with more like ground lamb because that was easier, like ground meats and stuff. But I think it's just finding the balance, working slowly. If you're vegan and you're listening to this, just, find ways you can get protein. And if you're eating 5 meals a day, say, okay, I'm going to start with having eggs one time a day, one egg, and just titrate slowly. You're moving in the right direction. It's not about getting excessive amounts of protein. It's about getting the right amount that works for your system so you can really create some homeostatic health.
Well said. And I'm a big proponent of raw dairy from a good source where they take care of the animals, and especially raw goat products. I do raw goat cheese almost every day, and my body thrives on it. So that's something I always recommend people try and see if it works for them, is raw goat cheese and fruit. That's an awesome combination.
Yeah, I mean, it's just finding. It's about creating your own journey. I tell everyone that when we start, it's like we could go to like a painting class, and they give you directions like piece by piece to paint a picture, but our pictures are going to look very different, even though it's the same directions. And that's what I want people to do, is like, even though I'm giving them guidance and support, I want them to create their own journey through this process and find what foods work for them based on our philosophy. And it's going to look different for everyone. And that's why it's dangerous to take every social media post for what it like face value and say, well, I tried the dairy, it didn't work, I got bloated. Well, do you eat dairy? No, I haven't had dairy in 20 years. You can't just go lightning speed through the healing process. There's a lot more to it than just eating dairy, but I think we have to really find our own individualized approach. And like you said, like goat cheese really works for you, that's great. It doesn't work for other people. And that's what this philosophy is all about, is really finding what meets your own individual needs.
Awesome. Kind of off topic, coffee enemas. I know you're not a fan of those. I know a lot of people promote those. Why are those harmful in your opinion? Is it overstimulating to the liver?
I just feel that those types of things are overutilized, and I look at the body as a machine. So if our body's not detoxifying, what's happening? Are we eating foods that are more of a burden on the system than helpful? Because if we provide the body with digestible metabolic foods, and we create autoregulation, the body will do what it's designed to do, and that's create health, that's detoxify, etc. So if you're in a compromised state, you're eating foods that are very like a large burden to the detox system, and then you do an enema, what happens? You're going to flush a lot of those toxins into the system. Can you detoxify them? No, the foundation isn't there, So I just find that like we can get the same results, if not better, over time by using food from a top-down approach versus a bottom-up approach, because that's not how the system works. You know, so I guess that would be my only philosophical reason.
Yeah, that's well said. I often think about, and I come from this world of, fast and your body will regenerate and autophagy and all these sexy words, but it's like you're breaking down your muscle and releasing inflammatory amino acids. You're breaking down your fat and releasing all these polyunsaturated fatty acids. Both of these are suppressing your immune system, your metabolism. What are you doing? I mean, same thing with the niacin flush, releasing all these. So a lot of these detoxes people are doing, I feel, are actually harming them.
Yeah, I mean, I've had clients that are very, very constipated, like haven't gone to the bathroom in a week, and I'll recommend they go get like a colonic, hydrocolonic. And I think occasionally that's okay if they're truly compacted. But when you do even a hydrocolonic or an enema, you're not getting way up there. You're only getting to a certain degree, So, and like I said, the whole GI system is pH driven. It's a top-down approach. So why not eat in a way that creates a foundation to allow the body to detoxify? And sometimes we do use supplements to help clear the body out from the top down versus the bottom up. And for us, we want to make the process as simplistic as possible, right? Because there's two groups: people that do nothing, and then there's the people that are super extreme with it, that are sticking a tube up their butt every morning. And for me, that's not going to create compliance with a lot of my clients. You know what I mean? And I'm looking for compliance.
It's a tall order.
Right. So most of the people we work with have children, right? They have 1, 2, 3 children. They work. Their schedules are busy. Oh, wait, I got to wake up and, before getting my daughter out of her crib and giving her food and changing her diaper, I'm going to stick a tube up my butt and take my coffee and just drain it in there. It doesn't make sense to me from a compliance standpoint, from even that standpoint. I'd rather have people create a foundation, create a life that works for them to allow their body to do what it's designed to do, instead of trying to cheat the system and not change.
Awesome. Long-term results over short-term, pretty
Right.
much. Yeah. So we're going to jump into some Q&A questions. I have a lot of questions from my friends for you.
Yeah.
What are the beginning steps one can take for thyroid health? I would imagine it's taking body temperature and pulse and kind of tracking if what you're doing is working, maybe.
Yes and no. I mean, I think the first thing, because I think a lot of people do that and they think it's like a marker for health. It's not. It's a feedback. It's a feedback mechanism. I think the first thing is just I don't know if there's like one thing. I would say become aware of your stressors. Sit down, give yourself space during the day, and think about what's happening in your body, in your life, etc. Because we have to change to create change. We can't just like say, well, I'm eating healthy, it's not working, right? Well, what if you have a crazy stressful job and then you leave there and you go to the gym, then you leave there and you pick up your 3 kids at daycare and come home, and then you have to make dinner, and then it's go, 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 right? That you're not going to get rid of your kids, your job, but we have to change the environment somehow, right? So I think sitting down and becoming aware of your stressors or how your day's going is a huge piece of it. Secondly, focus on what foods that are metabolic that you can intertwine into your day with the foods you're already eating, right? So, and that's a simple way to do it, because I think a lot of people try to pull the rug out from under them, but they don't even have a foundation, so they're going to crumble, right? So like, I wake up every day and I have coffee for breakfast, or I wake up every day and I have cereal for breakfast. Okay, it's not the best, but we got to start moving in the right direction. So when you have that cereal, have some eggs with it and a little bit of fruit. When you have that coffee, have some eggs and fruit, or have some eggs, toast, and fruit, or whatever it may be, to create some balance. Same thing with every meal. Like I'll say to Susie, I notice at 3 you're having an apple. Add a protein to it. Let's just keep it simple. Let's build that foundation and start bringing in some of the foods so you get comfortable with it. And the third thing would be working with food frequency, tuning into your body and just eating throughout the day to fuel your system. And I would say those are the 3 best things to start with. You can get into body temperature and pulse and all that, but you need that first to look at body temperature and pulse, because from the get-go, your body temperature and pulse are going to struggle. There's no point taking it. Let's create a little bit more of a foundation and more awareness before we start doing that.
I love it. Yeah, coming from the fasting world, my thing was retraining myself to eat frequently. And it was actually a struggle. And people think just because they wake up not hungry that it's good to not eat. But that's a sign of not being healthy, right? When you don't have a metabolism.
Yeah. So back in the day, there's a lab company called Biohealth Diagnostics. And this is a lab that I used to use, eons ago. And the owner was Dr. Timmons. And he was very close with the Czech Institute. He's passed away. But he did a lot of lectures and stuff. And I used to study his work extensively because he would talk about stress and adrenal fatigue and all that stuff. And he always said that the first sign of stress on the system is reduction in appetite, right? And it makes sense because when we're running from a lion, we're not thinking about eating food, right? That's simple. Physiologically, we know what's happening. So when you wake up and you're not hungry, it's a sign. It's a sign physiologically. It's like you're mouth breathing, right? So the worst thing you can do is just go, oh, okay, I'm going to wait till 10 or 11 or when I'm hungry to eat, right? We have to fuel the system. You have to eat something. It doesn't have to be big, because when people don't have an appetite, it's hard to wake up and eat a big breakfast. So I'll say start with like just one egg and a half an apple, just something small, right? Because as they start building throughout the day and eating more, what's going to happen is, let's say their appetite would come back at like noon. We'll start seeing it coming back at 11 and then 10. It's going to work its way backwards, right? So as long as they're getting fuel, that's the most important thing.
Awesome. Kind of piggybacking on that, more about how to support the thyroid. They're asking about herbs, minerals, etc. So those are down the road, right? First, get the foundation.
Yeah, for me, it's food. I feel like there's no better supplement than food. We don't really use mineral supplements. I mean, people can use like a mineral broth. I know you recommend shilajit or however you pronounce it. That's a great mineral source, of course. But supplements for thyroid health, we don't honestly recommend any directly for thyroid health. Sometimes in rare cases, we'll recommend niacinamide if someone's in a very catabolic state. But we're really about food and helping people regulate their system with food because everyone's on supplements. And I just want to do the opposite.
Yeah, and a lot of them are causing a lot of issues, I think. PCOS, anything to treat that or to manage that?
Yeah, and remember, it's not about the disease, it's about the person, right? When we chase the symptoms, what are we doing? We're doing allopathic medicine. So we call it what? Call it greeniopathy, right? So it's allopathic medicine, but we're doing the same thing. So you just want to give the body what it needs, and that's the bottom line. But we know if we understand what PCOS is, you're in a hyperinsulinic state, which means the ratio of carbs to proteins is way off. Normally, you're getting way too many carbs, not enough protein, and that's hyperinsulinemia. And that's why women will gain weight, get, their jawline will get acne, and they'll get facial hair. They'll get a lot of swelling and fatigue. The biggest thing is blood sugar regulation, but we have to move backwards. So we have to be very careful because they're very hyperinsulinic. There's tons of sugar in the system, but they're not storing it. So when we're introducing their frequency in the carbs as well, we have to go slow. We have to build slow. And we have to add carbs very slowly. So they would look opposite where I'd say, okay, with breakfast, have no more than like half a piece of fruit or a quarter to half a piece of root. So we work very slowly throughout the day because we want to kind of put out the fire and not add to the fire, right? So it is about blood sugar regulation, but it's about moving the opposite way.
Well said. Yeah. And I've been researching the liver a lot and how it stores glycogen. And I know like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or all these unsaturated fats, especially DHA, EPA, and ALA get stored in the liver. And then that will actually inhibit glycogen storage. It's pretty interesting. You talk about the body as a system of systems, and I love that.
Yeah. I mean, unsaturated fats in excess can really damage the beta cells of the pancreas, which is the insulin secreting cells. So it all plays a role. So it's like when you look at what we're recommending, we don't say to people, hey, don't eat unsaturated fat. It's bad for you, yada, yada, yada. we're doing it indirectly, right? Here are the foods, let's eat it. What's happening is they're eating a low unsaturated fat diet, higher saturated fat. So we're doing it indirectly without going deeper into it, because for a lot of people it's confusing. But yeah, that definitely plays a role, because unsaturated fats in the body have a similar effect in excess as estrogen, which kind of plays a role with insulin and the stress reaction. So it's all kind of connected. So of course, through that process, not only just regulating your blood sugar, but eating a more lower unsaturated fat diet.
Awesome. And I think that's a big issue with especially the vegan diet. Vegetarian, at least you're getting a lot of saturated fat, but a vegan diet is generally highly unsaturated, and the only saturated they're getting is coconut oil. So
right. Yeah.
It's one of the fundamental problems with that. My hands and feet are constantly cold. What advice would you give to reverse it? What we've been talking.
Yeah, I mean, it's all blood sugar, because that's more of being in a hyperadrenaline state. Adrenaline cuts off circulation in our peripheral vascular system to protect our organs. So really it just comes down to the type of food you're eating and the frequency that you're eating them. That's usually the case. So look at what you're doing, write it down, take a look at it and say, oh, I'm eating 3 times a day, or I'm eating 4 times a day, or I'm eating inconsistently throughout the week. And just look at that and pay attention to what's not working and shift it. Maybe you need to eat every 3 hours instead of 4 hours. Maybe you need to eat 5 times a day instead of 4 times a day. Maybe you need to make sure that you're eating 5 times a day every day instead of just 3 and then 4 and then 5 and then 2 and then 3 all over the place, right? So create that consistency, and that should be easy really to regulate.
Awesome. Best pots and pans to use for cooking?
But that's one of those things that you can do glass, you could do stainless steel. It really just comes down to your definition of health, how much money you want to spend. But stainless steel, of course, is great. Glass is great. But they're a pain in the ass to cook with, a real big pain in the ass. So, pick your poison. Obviously with pots, they're easy, but when you start like cooking eggs, on stainless steel, you're going to have a mess on your hands. But those two I'd say are the best and the healthiest.
Awesome. I just use the green pan, and I sweat in a sauna, so I don't worry about the little small chemicals I get here and there.
Yeah, here's the thing, and I actually talked to Ray Pete about this a long time ago, and not saying his word is bond, but he brought up a good point, and I agree with it now. I think back in the day I didn't, but when it comes to like ceramic coated pans and Teflon pans, he said as long as you don't cook it on a high heat, right, or scratch the pan, it's not toxic. When you cook a Teflon pan or a ceramic pan at high heat and it starts to smoke, or you scratch the pan, that's when it becomes toxic.
Interesting. Wow. How essential is exposing the region of skin that protects the thyroid? I guess they're asking exposing the thyroid to direct sunlight for thyroid health. If you looked into that, what time, how long should you have sunlight on the thyroid?
I mean, I don't think it has to be direct. I mean, emotionally, if that makes you feel better, go for it. I mean, I think that as long as we're getting our skin exposed to sunlight, that's beneficial because our cells thrive on light, red light, sunlight, etc. We have enzymes in our cells that help us convert that to usable energy. That's why most of us feel better in the summer versus the winter. So exposing our skin, whether it be your back, your neck, if you feel more grounded, spiritual, balanced, you feel like it's going to help you more, expose your neck. I think the best time of the day would be midday, obviously, like between 10 and 2, somewhere in there. For how long? I don't know. I mean, there's people that say 20 minutes, etc. I think it really comes down to whatever you can do, because I think a lot of us shame ourselves. I can't do 20 minutes. Oh my God. Well, I only have a 15-minute break, and that's fine. Like you got to utilize what you have and build upon that. So if you can only do 10 minutes, start there. It's better than nothing.
Awesome. Best way to test your thyroid. Can a general doctor read the test properly, or is there a way to get labs and read them yourself?
Nowadays, you could do labs online easily. It's crazy. But I think the biggest thing is when you go to – I think people poo-poo doctors, and the problem is when you go to a doctor, you have to understand the definition of a doctor. They do labs based on research, and supply medications. That's their job. So if you're going to them with different expectations, it's not their fault. It's your fault. If you don't want to do labs, or you want to do a different type of lab, or you don't want to take a medication, then don't go to your doctor, right? Because doctors are not going to do full thyroid panels, most doctors, based on insurance, because research only shows you need TSH and yada, yada, yada. You go to a naturopath, someone else, sure, right? So they're just going to look at TSH. Sometimes they'll look at T3, sometimes they'll look at T4, depending on your insurance. But the funny thing is, no matter what, 99% of the time, no matter what they test, they're going to recommend T4. So what's the point of doing the lab, right? It doesn't make sense to me. But if you want to talk about the best panel, it'd be like doing a cholesterol panel, along with like TSH, free T3, free T4, T3, T4, TPO, etc. So that would be your best panel. But realistically, here's the thing. You don't need to do that. Don't waste your money and don't waste your time. Take your body temperature and pulse. Because in 18 years, I've worked with probably me and my wife together, 5 people that have a true thyroid issue, which means the thyroid is not producing thyroid hormone. You would need a lab for that. Most people are producing thyroid hormone, but they have conversion issues, right? And that means our cells are not getting thyroid hormone. And you can use body temperature and pulse to evaluate that. It's free, it's simple, it's easy, and you can do it whenever you want. You don't have to pay $100. So it just depends what you want. Labs are designed to help you with a diagnosis. So if you want a diagnosis, do a lab, but make that differentiation. Like, people come to me and say, what labs do you want me to do? I don't want you to do any labs. If you want to do labs, go work with your doctor. I'm trying to take you down a different route. So I think you have to make that distinction. But body temperature and pulse helps us look at what the cell is utilizing for thyroid hormone. And that's a better indicator.
That's fascinating. I think that's an important point to emphasize, that most people have conversion issues, and 90% of the T4 to T3 is converted in the liver, right?
Yeah, most people, if you study the work of Dr. Karazin, he talks about the different types of conversion issues, whether it's pituitary, stress, estrogen, low minerals, low glycogen storage, thyroid resistance, etc. They're all the same. We have a conversion issue. That's it. So most people are producing it. They're just not converting it.
Wow, that's a really important point. Someone says they have Hashimotos and they're just coming out of a vegan diet. They're wondering if vegetarian keto would be beneficial. Say maybe vegetarian eating frequently.
I just came out of vegetarian and I have Hashimoto's. Would vegetarian keto work? I think the answer is in the question. My answer would be no. Vegetarian keto. What's next? I mean, never heard of that.
Hashimoto's you talk about, it's not a thyroid issue, right?
Yeah. So we truly believe, and this is based off our work, understanding physiology, and even looking at like people like Dr. Karazian. When you look at Hashimoto's, it's an immune system dysfunction. It's not a thyroid dysfunction. Doctors look at it as a thyroid problem, right? Because they have binoculars on. It's an immune system problem. We have to treat the immune system to regulate the thyroid. And unfortunately, most people are treated opposite. Now, when we look at Hashimoto's, if it's caught early, what is early? I don't know. It can be treated nutritionally 100%, right? But the body's in a chronic state. If you put yourself on medication, unfortunately, there's no foundation for that to work. And a lot of the times it doesn't work. So we're trying to get people to say, okay, well, I've been in an immune suppressed state for a long time, or it's causing that. Well, what is the biggest thing in our environment that's going to create immune system suppression? Stress, prolonged stress. It suppresses the immune system 100%. When they do organ transplant surgeries, right? They take an organ out of A and put it in B. They give stress hormones to the B to suppress the immune system so they can put the organ in the body so it doesn't get rejected. So what does that tell us? It tells us a lot, right? So, that was research that I was doing last year with dead people. No, I'm just kidding. I started in a movie last week, but I found it really, really amazing, and it's true, do the research. It is true. I looked it up and it's crazy. So I think we're getting in our way and just being like, oh, I have Hashimoto's. It's so complex. I'm never going to heal. If you think like that, maybe you won't. But if you change your mindset and say, wow, like this is what's happening, this is what I need to do to move forward, and you do it, you can really build the body back up. And we truly believe it. Why? Because we don't do it with people. People are doing it with our work.
Awesome. Can MCS be related to thyroid? I don't know what that stands for. Some type of another name for a condition?
Yeah, MCS. I mean, is it multiple sclerosis?
Yeah, we can go to the next one. I'm not sure.
I mean, here's the thing. I think everyone needs food. Well, I know everyone needs food. We're human.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't matter if you have MS, MCS, ABCD, EFG, it doesn't matter. You need food to create a foundation to support everything you're doing. So my answer would be yes.
Awesome. Iodine for thyroid goiters, that can actually cause issues, right? Supplementing iodine.
Yeah. So if you look at our society, iodine's in everything, right? Now, here's the thing. The thyroid uses a little bit of iodine and tyrosine, et cetera, to make thyroid hormone. And here's where a lot of people go wrong. You don't have a thyroid issue, right? You don't need the iodine. You have a conversion issue. So you take the iodine, when you don't have a problem making the thyroid hormone, what do? You shut it down. And they've shown that like the smallest amount of iodine can really have a negative effect on thyroid health. So I think people have to start looking at hypothyroidism or thyroid issues as more of a functional issue, a conversion issue, than a thyroid issue itself. Because we've never used tyrosine or iodine with people, and people have gotten tremendous results.
Awesome. Is diabetes reversible after being insulin dependent?
Type 1, it's an interesting question. I'm sure there's people out there that have. That's all I have to say. Type 1 diabetes is actually an autoimmune issue, believe it or not. It's considered an autoimmune issue. Of course, there's a lot of people saying it's stress related, it's polyunsaturated fat related, because we have to look at it. Like I had a client, it's like you have these people that are 25, 30, 35, 40 that are all of a sudden having diabetes, right? And a great person to like look into to study kind of like stress, trauma, and its relation to disease would be Gabor Mate, Gabor, and then Mate. He talks a lot about that. The correlation between like just the emotional relationship with yourself and others in relation to disease and how they manifest. And I think he talks about type 1 diabetes, but I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that claim they have. With me, no, but I've seen people that have had type 1 diabetes and have been able to feel more vital, take less insulin throughout the day, find more balance throughout the day with everything they're doing, their medication, etc. So yeah, it's been really powerful. I've been people on like crazy, 300 blood sugar in the morning, 400, and now they're waking up with like 150, so it is powerful. And my goal when I work with those people aren't to say I'm going to reverse your disease. That's not my goal. My goal is I'm going to help just support you through what's going on.
Awesome. And I think a lot of it is switching the mindset that sugar causes diabetes, because it's really the unsaturated fats that damage, like you said, the beta cells in the pancreas.
Well, I think it's different with type 1, type 2. Type 2 is just lack of movement and excessive intake of carbs, right? But here's the kicker. That plays a role, but if we have to go deeper, right? And it's really the inability of our cells to take in glucose because of the amount of free fatty acids that are blocking sugar from getting in there, right? So it's the excess intake, but it's our body's inability to process it and get in the cell that's a problem, right? So we can say it is free fatty acids, that are more the issue. And if you study the work of PJ Randall, he talks a lot about that when we talk about diabetes, whether it's type 1 or type 2.
Awesome. What are the easy to understand signs of a good or fast or slow? Basically, how do you diagnose your metabolism? What are some simple signs to look at?
Are you happy, horny, and hungry? Then you're metabolic. 3 H's.
Love it.
I mean, women are different, but yeah, if you're happy, horny, and hungry, 3 H's.
Very simple. Where do thyroid nodules come from? Can you heal them with food? Yeah.
I think aisle 7 at Best Buy, that's where they come from. I don't know. It's just that chronically stressed inflammatory state. Can they be regulated? Sure, but it really just means your thyroid's inflamed.
Awesome. Ectopic thyroid in children. Have you looked into that? I've never heard of that.
I don't know. Can't answer.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard that. How to tell if your adrenaline is high using body temperature and pulse. Best way to lower adrenaline.
Usually it's going to be acutely, it'll be low pulse. Chronically, it'll be high pulse. So acutely, it's going to be like a low body temperature, low pulse. Chronically, it'll be a normal body temperature and high pulse, like above 85. How to regulate it? Food frequency, blood sugar regulation, and salt.
Awesome. Best HRT for women whose natural hormones are starting to decline or reaching menopause.
Food.
Awesome.
I mean, there are some women, of course, that need progesterone, right? But we always say food first. You have to create that foundation, right? Because most women, this is something me and my wife were talking about today, have hot flashes as they're going through menopause, or they could be 30 and have menopausal-like symptoms because their body is in such a stress state. Anytime we're in a stress state, catabolic state, anabolic hormones go down. Testosterone, thyroid, progesterone. So what happens? That leaves estrogen unopposed. The ratio is now imbalanced. Estrogen is a very excitatory hormone when it's not balanced with progesterone, right? And it's a very hypoxic, hypothermic hormone. So it steals oxygen from our cells. And what it does is it causes vasodilation. So it causes us to lose heat through the skin. And that's why a lot of women have hot flashes, etc. So we have to regulate that process and create more balance with food and frequency before we even think about adding in the progesterone. Because if you add in the progesterone in that case, a lot of the times you can actually convert that to cortisol.
Wow. Yeah. I've heard you say in the past, like supplementing thyroid hormone, that's like putting nitrous in a broken engine. It's like it could burn it out, right? Same thing with taking hormones.
Yeah. So I'd say get your foundation set and then look into, maybe after 3 to 6 months, if you still need the progesterone for support. But it comes down to how much and when should you use it. I would say this, that most women that are not true menopausal or perimenopause don't need progesterone. They just need to regulate their nutrition and their stressors. And some women in perimenopause and menopause will need, after 3, 4, or 5 months of nutrition, will need some progesterone support.
Awesome. This is kind of a good segue. Final question. What are the top 3 most important practices for men to increase testosterone and reduce estrogen?
I think the first one is blood sugar, right? That's going to play a huge role in whether or not we're producing testosterone or aromatizing into estrogen. That's the first thing. I guess the second would be movement, right? Movement in the right type, because when we move and when we do it properly, we increase the mitochondria in our muscles and cells. And of course, all this ties into the thyroid. So blood sugar regulation, movement, and sleep. I think when you're talking about testosterone, it's really about what can I do to create balance in my system? Because if you're catabolic, that's going to drop. And this is why I'm seeing 25-year-old, 30-year-olds that are coming to me saying, I'm on TRT, or my doctor's recommending TRT. When you're that young, you don't need TRT, okay? You have type 2 hypogonadism. The testes are working. They're just not getting a signal from the pituitary, and that's why you have low testosterone, because of stress, right? Stress goes up, testosterone goes down, running from a lion. So it's looking at how can I reduce stress in my life with breath work, with sleep, with blood sugar regulation, etc. You do that over time, your testosterone will come up for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, it's my understanding that cholesterol it's so important for all the sex steroid hormones, and so that's why a vegan diet is so dangerous, because you can't even make hormones.
And that ties into the food and blood sugar that all is in there. It's like indirectly in there because you're going to be eating those metabolic foods, which are going to help you play a role in producing your storal hormones, help you play a role in converting thyroid hormone, etc.
Awesome. Well, that was really great stuff. I think people got a lot out of that. Where can people find your work?
Our website is eastwesthealing.com. You can find a lot of our information on there. We have a free download, free 15-minute consult. As well, you can find us on Facebook, which is East West Healing, or Instagram, Our Instagram is Real Food Gangstas. That's gang and then STAS. So Real Food Gangstas. So we're always posting. We have a lot of good, YouTubes as well, East West Healing. You can find all that from our website. So just go to eastwesthealing.com. You can find all the social media stuff there.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Josh. That really appreciate you coming on the show, and appreciate your research and just your passion for this topic. I think you're helping a lot of people and will continue to for many years. So this is important. Thank you, my friend. Yeah. Thank you. Wow, that was a lot of information. Hope you guys can digest all of that. Probably one to listen to multiple times and really connect the dots on what Josh is talking about. He has a lot of experience with helping people with digestive issues and thyroid issues and fatigue and just low energy, low mood, all of that stuff. So if his approach resonates with you, definitely check out his information, Jeannie's information on their website. Like he said, eastwesthealing.com is the best hub to get to. And then from there, you could find his YouTube and all of his other avenues of sharing. Today's quote is by Robert M. Sapolsky from the book Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. If you are that zebra running for your life, or that lion sprinting for your meal, your body's physiological response mechanisms are superbly adapted for dealing with such short-term physical emergencies. For the vast majority of beasts on this planet, stress is about a short-term crisis, after which it's either over with or you're over with. When we sit around and worry about stressful things, we turn on the same physiological responses, but they are potentially a disaster when provoked chronically. A large body of evidence suggests that stress-related disease emerges predominantly out of the fact that we so often activate a physiological system that is evolved for responding to acute physical emergencies, but we turn it on for months on end, worrying about mortgages, relationships, and promotions. If you receive value from this show, I would really appreciate if you head over to matt-blackburn.com, and I have all my recommended products there. It's taken me years to build relationships and find the most affordable and effective tools to support your health. So please check that out, and any purchase you make on there supports my continuing work and research.